A lone cowboy rode through the dark, stormy night, rain lashing against his worn hat and coat, his horse struggling through the muddy trail. Lightning flashed, revealing a small boy holding tightly to his frail grandmother, both trembling from the cold and fear. The cowboy's heart skipped a beat. He had seen many travelers, but none like this, so vulnerable, so lost. Without thinking, he guided his horse closer, calling gently, offering warmth and shelter. The grandmother's eyes, tired but hopeful, met his, and the boy clutched his hand as if sensing safety for the first time. He led them to his small, lonely cabin, unaware that these strangers were far more than they seemed. Unknown to him, this act of kindness would unravel secrets, change destinies, and bind their lives together in ways the cowboy could never. The cowboy lived on the edge of the territory, in a small, weathered cabin surrounded by endless plains, where the wind whispered secrets he had no one to share with. Each day he rode alone, the sun rising and setting over empty fields, his horse the only companion he trusted. People in nearby towns knew him as kind and helpful, yet no one ever got close. He preferred it that way, his heart guarded by years of solitude. He dreamed of friendship, of laughter, of a family he never had, but he told himself it was only a wish, one that would probably never come true. Nights were the hardest, long and silent, with memories of what could have been haunting him. Yet, despite his loneliness, he carried on, riding the territory with quiet determination, unaware that soon, his solitary life would be touched by strangers who would change everything he thought he knew about trust, hope, and unexpected connections that imagine, turning a lonely night into a story of courage, trust, and unexpected fortune. The cowboy led the boy and his grandmother into his cabin, the wind howling outside as rain pelted the roof with relentless force, and for the first time in years, the small space felt alive with warmth and presence. He helped the grandmother remove her soaked shawl while the boy clung tightly to his arm, eyes wide and full of trust he had rarely earned from anyone. And as he stoked the fire and handed them blankets, he noticed the careful way the grandmother's fingers trembled yet worked skillfully, and the polite, almost surprising manners of the boy, who quietly thanked him for every small gesture, making the cowboy's heart stir with a feeling he couldn't name, a mix of protectiveness, wonder, and something like hope. And over the next hours he learned small details, how the grandmother hummed soft tunes from long ago and shared tiny stories that made the boy laugh and smile despite the storm. And he found himself listening more than he had ever listened to anyone, feeling each word sink into the quiet corners of his life, realizing that he had not known how empty his days had been until now. And as night deepened, he offered them simple food, watching the boy eat cautiously yet with growing comfort, noticing how the grandmother's eyes softened when she saw her grandson safe and warm, and he felt an unfamiliar sense of connection that was almost frightening in its intensity, because it made his solitude feel suddenly fragile and precious. And he knew that once the storm passed, the outside world would intrude again, yet he did not care because right now, their presence mattered more than anything, and each moment brought small discoveries, the boy's quick understanding of how to hold a rope, the grandmother's sharp memory for herbs and remedies, the little ways they adapted to his cabin and routine without complaint. And though he tried to remain detached, he realized that he was already imagining the mornings with the boy riding beside him, the grandmother telling tales as he worked, and nights when laughter might replace silence. And at times he caught himself staring at them with awe, wondering how such fragile people could evoke such strength and change. And though a shadow of doubt crept in about who they really were, he pushed it aside, focusing only on their safety and comfort, his instincts telling him that kindness was enough for now. And as the fire crackled and the storm raged outside, the cowboy felt a strange anticipation, a sense that their arrival was no coincidence, that fate had guided them to his doorstep for reasons he could not yet understand. And as he finally settled in near the hearth, watching the boy's eyes grow heavy with sleep and the grandmother's gentle nod of gratitude, he realized that his lonely existence had begun to fill with something far richer than he had ever imagined, a bond forged not by wealth or power, but by trust and courage. And though he did not know what tomorrow would bring, he felt certain that the days ahead, however uncertain, would never be the same, that this night, stormy and chaotic, had already started a story that would shape all their lives in ways he could barely comprehend. And in that small cabin on the edge of the territory, with wind and rain screaming outside, the cowboy, the boy, and his grandmother shared a fragile but powerful moment of safety, understanding, and the unspoken promise of connection that neither time nor distance could ever erase. Over the following days, the cowboy's quiet cabin slowly filled with life as the boy and his grandmother settled into an unspoken rhythm that both surprised and warmed him. Each morning beginning with the soft light spilling through the small windows as the boy clumsily attempted to saddle the horse under the cowboy's patient guidance, his small hands fumbling but eager, eyes wide with excitement and trust, while the grandmother moved around the cabin with a graceful diligence, telling stories of her youth, of lands far beyond the territory, of hardships survived and moments of joy that seemed to linger in her gentle voice. And as he listened, the cowboy felt a warmth he had long forgotten, a tenderness that melted years of solitude and hardened walls around his heart. And he found himself laughing at the boy's innocent mistakes, correcting him with gentle instruction, teaching him how to repair fences, mend harnesses, and ride through the plains with confidence, each lesson deepening a bond that words alone could not capture. While the grandmother watched with approving smiles, offering wisdom that was quiet but profound, telling tales that made the cowboy think, remember, and reflect on his own lonely life. And each night, after the fire had been stoked and supper quietly shared, he would sit across from them and listen to the boy's questions, ranging from simple curiosities to deep ponderings about the world. And he realized how much he had missed the presence of family, the laughter of someone depending on him, the gentle touch of gratitude in a glance. And as days passed, the small cabin echoed with sounds of life he had never thought he would hear, the boy's laughter bouncing off the walls, the grandmother's soft humming mingling with the crackle of the fire. And in those moments, he understood that this connection, fragile yet steadfast, was slowly weaving a new reality for him, one where loneliness no longer ruled his days. And he found himself taking small joys and teaching the boy to ride without fear, watching as the boy's confidence grew, celebrating every success with proud nods and quiet exclamations, while the grandmother's stories not only entertained but offered guidance and subtle lessons that the cowboy absorbed with quiet gratitude. And in return, he shared parts of his life, stories of the open plains, of nights spent under endless stars, of solitude and reflection. And the three of them began to form a rhythm that felt like family, not forced but natural, in every shared meal, every chore completed together, every laugh and whispered secret strengthened a bond that neither money nor status could have bought. And as the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the cowboy felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known, a quiet joy that replaced emptiness. And though he did not yet know who these strangers truly were, their presence had transformed his life in ways that went beyond gratitude or duty, creating a space in his heart that would not easily fade. A reminder that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness, patience, and shared experience could turn loneliness into love, strangers into family, and a solitary cabin on the edge of the territory into a place of warmth, hope, and enduring connection that would shape the days to come in ways he could not yet imagine. As the days passed, and the boy grew more confident riding through the fields while the grandmother tended to small tasks with quiet dignity, the cowboy began noticing subtle things that made him pause and wonder, small details he had initially dismissed but that now seemed impossible to ignore. The boy's manners were unusually polished, his words carefully chosen, respectful beyond his years, and the grandmother carried herself with a grace and poise that hinted at a life far beyond the simple plains they now inhabited. Her hands adorned with delicate rings that caught the sunlight and reflected a wealth he could scarcely imagine. And there was an air of knowledge in the way they spoke of distant lands and properties, a familiarity with power and privilege that clashed sharply with their humble appearance. And as rumors reached him from nearby towns about a missing wealthy family, the pieces began to align in his mind, sparking a tension he could not shake, a quiet unease that mingled with the warmth he felt for them. And he found himself observing their every action, watching how the boy handled small amounts of money with care, how the grandmother's stories hinted at experiences that were not ordinary, and each moment made him question whether he had been unknowingly hosting people of immense importance. And though the thought should have made him wary, he felt a strange pull of loyalty and protection, not wanting to treat them differently. Yet the curiosity gnawed at him relentlessly, turning quiet smiles into pensive glances, simple meals into moments of silent speculation, and every word they spoke now carried weight, every gesture a potential clue, and he began to replay conversations in his mind, searching for inconsistencies, for hints that might confirm his growing suspicion. And yet, despite the tension, he found himself reluctant to confront them, afraid that asking directly might shatter the fragile trust they had built, the connection that had slowly grown between them over laughter, shared chores, and evenings by the fire. And the more he observed, the more conflicted he became, torn between the need to know the truth and the desire to preserve the bond that had begun to fill the emptiness in his life. And nights became restless, his thoughts racing as he imagined scenarios both frightening and astonishing, imagining the consequences of discovery, the way the territory might react. And even though he tried to dismiss it as idle speculation, the signs were persistent, the boy's curiosity about things far beyond a simple frontier life, the grandmother's quiet confidence, and the subtle hints of wealth woven into ordinary routines. And as he finally stepped outside one evening to gaze across the plains, the sun dipping low in a sky streaked with orange and crimson, he realized that his life was teetering on the edge of revelation, that soon the truth would surface, and he would have to confront it. And the thought filled him with both dread and anticipation, knowing that whatever the outcome, the simplicity and warmth they had shared could be threatened. Yet a part of him also felt exhilarated, understanding that this mystery, these hidden layers of identity, had transformed his quiet cabin into a place of suspense and possibility, where every glance, every gesture, every word mattered. And the cowboy, standing alone against the evening wind, felt the weight of uncertainty, the pull of human connection, and the quiet thrill of discovering that sometimes the people who enter your life in the most unexpected way carry secrets that can change everything you thought you knew about trust, kindness, and the fragile, intricate bonds that define the heart. That evening, just as the golden light of sunset began to fade into a deep purple twilight, the sound of hooves echoed across the plain, startling the cowboy as he stepped out of his cabin to see a small delegation approaching. Riders dressed in fine clothing and mounted on impressive horses, and a sense of tension gripped him. Instantly, a mix of curiosity and unease as the boy clutched his hand, and the grandmother adjusted her shawl with a calm dignity that betrayed nothing. And as the riders drew nearer, their leader dismounted gracefully and spoke in measured tones, explaining that they had been searching for the missing family of the territory, the very boy and grandmother who now stood quietly in the cabin doorway. And with each word, the cowboy felt his chest tighten, disbelief washing over him in heavy waves. Because the polite manners, the stories, the quiet strength he had observed over the past days now revealed themselves as signs of immense influence and wealth, and he staggered inward, heart pounding, unable to reconcile the simple warmth and laughter they had shared with the power and prominence they clearly held. And the boy looked up at him with trusting eyes, unaware of the revelation that had just shifted the world around them, while the grandmother, serene yet commanding, acknowledged the delegation with a graceful nod, her eyes briefly meeting the cowboy's with a mixture of gratitude and gentle pride. And he realized that all along, he had been offering kindness not to strangers, but to people whose reach and generosity touched the entire territory, a fact that made him feel both awestruck and humbled, the weight of unintentional service and genuine compassion settling deep in his chest. And as he slowly stepped forward, his hands rough and calloused from years of solitary work, he felt an unfamiliar rush of emotion, a combination of honor, humility, and the surreal understanding that his simple act of welcoming them into his home had created a bridge between worlds, one of trust and integrity that no amount of gold or land could have constructed. And in that moment, the cabin seemed smaller, yet infinitely larger in significance, the walls echoing with the laughter and lessons shared, now amplified by the knowledge of who these people truly were. And as the delegation conversed with the grandmother, confirming her identity and the boy's rightful place. The cowboy watched quietly, the firelight reflecting off the polished rings and delicate jewelry, symbols of the life he had unknowingly touched, and he felt a swelling in his chest, a mixture of pride and disbelief, realizing that his loneliness, his quiet existence on the outskirts of the territory, had been forever transformed by the simple courage to offer warmth and safety without question. And as the sun disappeared behind distant hills, casting long shadows across the plains, he finally understood that wealth and influence were meaningless without the human connection he had cultivated over these days. And in that revelation, a deep sense of fulfillment and peace settled over him, knowing that in sheltering the boy and his grandmother, he had not only provided refuge, but had also discovered the profound truth that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can ripple into greatness. Beyond imagination, shaping lives, hearts, and destinies in ways even the most powerful could not command. And in the quiet aftermath, standing in the doorway of his cabin, the cowboy's eyes softened as he realized he had been part of a story far larger than his solitary life, one that would echo across the territory and in his heart forever, a story of trust, compassion, and unexpected revelation that changed everything he had ever known about family, wealth, and the true meaning of human connection. Despite the revelation of the boy and grandmother's immense wealth, the cowboy felt no shift in the warmth or simplicity that had filled his cabin over the past days. And from the very first moment of understanding, they treated him with a respect and kindness that made him realize their hearts were as generous as their fortune, and there was no expectation of servitude or reward, only genuine friendship, a bond built on trust and shared experience. And as they spoke quietly about plans for the territory, the cowboy noticed how the boy's laughter remained untouched by privilege, how the grandmother's stories retained their humble charm, and in every gesture, in every glance, he sensed that his actions, the small kindnesses, the shelter offered, the patience in teaching and listening, were valued above any wealth they possessed, and the knowledge filled him with a quiet pride, a sense of belonging he had never imagined possible. And he realized that for the first time in years, he was part of something larger than himself, a family not defined by gold or lands, but by connection, trust, and compassion. And as they worked together in the cabin, repairing fences, tending the horse, and preparing meals, the cowboy felt the rhythm of life returning to him, laughter and conversation replacing the silence that had been his constant companion, and each day deepened the bond. Each shared task and quiet evening by the fire reinforcing a trust that no riches could buy. And he began to see the territory not as a lonely expanse, but as a landscape of possibility, a place where kindness could ripple into enduring relationships. And as the boy rode beside him across the plains, the wind whipping through his hair, and the grandmother walked close by, sharing soft advice and gentle encouragement, he realized that he had become an irreplaceable part of their lives, just as they had become a part of his. And in the evenings, sitting together beneath the stars, stories and memories flowing between them like a river of light, he understood that true wealth had never been gold, land, or influence, but the hearts he had touched and the hearts that had touched his in return. And the cabin, once a quiet refuge for a solitary man, now echoed with the sounds of life, the warmth of connection, and the comfort of knowing he was seen and valued for who he truly was, not for what he could provide. And each day brought new discoveries, new moments of joy and shared understanding. And the cowboy felt a fulfillment that was profound and sustaining, a knowledge that the universe had rewarded his simple courage with a treasure far beyond material measure. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting golden light across the plains, he looked at the boy racing ahead, the grandmother smiling gently at his side, and the landscape stretched before them like a canvas of endless possibilities. And he knew that the bonds formed here would endure through storms and sunshine alike, shaping not only the lives of those in the cabin, but the very soul of the territory itself. And in that quiet, radiant moment, he felt complete, no longer a lonely cowboy at the edge of the world, but a man connected to love, trust, and a family whose gratitude and warmth confirmed the truth he had always longed to believe, that acts of kindness and courage create relationships more enduring and valuable than any fortune, and that true friendship, nurtured with care, Patience and respect is the richest treasure anyone could ever hope to find, transforming lives in ways nothing else could. And the cowboy, smiling softly to himself, understood that he had finally found a home in hearts that welcomed him fully and without condition. The cowboy watched silently as the boy rode across the wide, golden fields, his laughter carrying on the wind, free and unafraid, while the grandmother stood nearby, her warm smile reflecting pride and gratitude. And in that moment, the cowboy felt a deep stirring in his chest, a quiet joy that he had never known, understanding finally that true wealth was never gold, land, or influence, but the courage to show kindness, the patience to care, and the willingness to open one's heart without expectation. And as he turned to watch the horizon, he saw the endless sky stretching above, a vast reminder of life's unpredictable twists. And he realized that his lonely heart had been filled in ways money could never achieve. And the territory itself seemed to whisper his story, the tale of a man who had helped strangers without knowing who they were, and in doing so had created bonds, trust, and love that would endure forever, leaving an unforgettable mark on all their lives.